After my fiancé left me at the altar, my family said it was because I was too pathetic to love. They posted my crying face online and turned it into a meme. My little sister called me cringe garbage at dinner. Now they're all begging me to come home. But I'm not the same anymore. I'm not that broken girl anymore. And they just learned what I've been planning. I'm Helena. I grew up in Darien, Connecticut. For those who don't know, it's one of those polished, wealthy towns where every lawn looks like a magazine cover and everyone pretends their family is perfect behind their perfectly trimmed hedges. But our house wasn't warm. It was more like a stage set, beautiful, expensive, hollow. My parents, Douglas and Celeste, were big on appearances. My father ran a law firm and walked like every floor was a courtroom. My mother, a sharp-tongued interior designer, obsessed over what other people thought of us more than she ever did about who we were. I was the middle child. Alden was the golden boy, the firstborn. Ivy League, finance career, a condo in Tribeca before he was 30. My younger sister, Isla, was basically a blonde, filtered hurricane. She made a name for herself through Instagram, curated her life to look perfect, and had a following bigger than most small-town newspapers. And then there was me, Helena. I was the quiet one. Studied literature. Wrote poetry. I love art. I worked in a bookstore in New Haven and didn't care about fancy dinners or designer purses. I never fit the mold, and they never let me forget it. At every family dinner, I was disappointed. The one with the cute hobby instead of a real career. The one who still wasn't married. That changed when I met Peter. Peter was a trauma surgeon, serious, brilliant, kind, or at least I thought he was. We met at a book club for young professionals. He was the first man who seemed genuinely interested in me for who I was. He liked my writing. He loved my cat. He didn't care that I didn't have a six-figure income or that I couldn't tell the difference between Bordeaux and Merlot. We dated for almost 2 years. Everyone said he was too good to be true. Maybe they were right. The wedding was supposed to be small but beautiful, by the harbor in Mystic, Connecticut. I remember obsessing over every little detail. I wanted lavender in my bouquet because my grandmother used to grow it. I wanted only acoustic music. I wanted simplicity and sincerity. I paid for most of it myself because my parents said they were uncomfortable funding something they hadn't approved of. It was supposed to be a day about love. My love. Instead, I ended up standing under a white arch, heart racing, dress clinging to my skin in the July heat, while the minutes dragged on. The music stopped. People whispered. My maid of honor, a friend from college, was checking her phone frantically. My father looked embarrassed. My mother kept sipping wine, avoiding eye contact. Peter never came. No call. No text. Nothing. Eventually, someone from his side came forward and quietly said he wasn't sure and needed space. At first, I thought it was a mistake, like maybe he got into a car accident or was caught up with a patient. But as the silence stretched into hours, reality hit. He wasn't coming. I didn't even cry at first. I just stood there in that expensive dress, feeling like I was watching my own life from outside my body. Then came the laughter. Not from the guests. From Isla. She filmed it. My trembling lips, the tears starting to pool, my panicked eyes. And she posted it. The caption was something like, "When your sister is so clingy she gets ghosted at the altar, skull face with tears of joy, #yikes, #desperate much, my crying face." My real, raw heartbreak. Turned into internet content. Into *King meme. It got picked up by a bunch of humor accounts. One even gave it the title Bride of Nope. The comments were brutal. Must have dodged a bullet. She looks like she's about to write a 20-part breakup poem. No wonder he left. My own family? They thought it was funny. My father texted me a single line later that night, "Let's keep this quiet. It's embarrassing enough as is." My mother told me the next morning, "It's better it happened now before you had kids or bought property." And Isla? At dinner 2 nights later, because yes, they still made me sit through family dinners, she looked me in the eye and called me cringe garbage. Her exact words. "You're like that girl in high school who tried too hard. It's cringe garbage, Helena." I didn't respond. I didn't say a single word. I just got up from the table and left. They thought I'd break. And for a while, I did. I moved into a friend's basement in Beacon, New York. I deleted all my social media. I stopped answering calls. I lost 20 pounds from stress. For weeks, I didn't do much more than sleep and cry and stare at the wall. But I didn't stay broken. Slowly, something inside me began to change. It wasn't anger. Not at first. It was more like clarity. I realized I had spent my whole life trying to win the approval of people who saw me as a punchline. I was tired of being quiet. Of being kind. Of taking the high road while they laughed from the sidelines. So I started rebuilding. I dyed my hair. Moved to Asheville, North Carolina, and started over. Got a job at a nonprofit art studio. Started painting again. I began a podcast, just me, anonymous at first, talking about rejection, family dysfunction, emotional abuse, and public shaming. It was called The Broken Altar. People listened. A lot of people. I didn't tell them who I was. I didn't talk about my family or name names. I just told the truth. About the pain. The silence. The gaslighting. The cruelty that hides behind perfect photos and staged holiday cards. Then one day, a listener messaged me, "You're the girl from that meme, aren't you?" I stared at the message for a long time before replying, "Yes. But I'm not her anymore." They say time heals all wounds. That's a lie. Time doesn't heal. It distills. It condenses your pain into something sharper. Cleaner. Something you can carry in your pocket and pull out when you need to remind yourself why you'll never go back. As the broken altar grew, I stayed in Asheville. There's something about the mountains that holds you. People don't rush here the way they do up north. No one cared who my parents were or that I was once a meme. I was just Helena, this woman who made art, volunteered at workshops, and ran a podcast that was slowly becoming a lifeline for a community of women who'd also been discarded, mocked, written off. I kept things low-key for a long time. My real name wasn't attached to anything. I didn't do video interviews. I didn't show my face. But eventually, that changed when I got invited to speak at a private women's retreat in Vermont. It was a modest event, maybe 50 people in a renovated barn, but it lit something in me. I spoke for an hour. Told my story. My whole story. No masks. No anonymity. I was shaking when I finished. I was sure I had overshared or come off bitter. But people stood up. They clapped. Some cried. A woman in her 60s hugged me and said, "You just told me about my life," but out loud. After that, I started saying yes more. Yes to bigger events. Yes to a literary agent who found my podcast and thought it could be a book. Yes to interviews. It was surreal. There were people who knew me now, but not as a meme. They knew me as someone who had turned pain into something real. Something useful. Something powerful. Then one morning last summer, I got an email that made my stomach clench. Subject line, important, feature request, Connecticut Life magazine sender, megan.charlton@lifemag.com. Apparently, they wanted to do a feature on women who had turned public embarrassment into public empowerment. I laughed. It was ironic. But also, appropriate. I agreed, under one condition, that I get to write the first draft of my story. They accepted. When it was published, the headline read, "From Humiliation to Healing, How Helena Took Back Her Narrative." There it was. My name. My photo. My story. In print. It got picked up by other outlets. Within weeks, I was getting speaking invitations from universities, nonprofits, even a national conference on digital abuse. And that's when they saw me again. I hadn't heard a word from any of them, my parents, Alden, Isla, in over a year. The last thing I remembered was Isla laughing through a cocktail at the dinner table, quoting her own caption like she was proud of it. Now, suddenly, they were blowing up my email. Alden was first. "Helena, congrats on the article. I didn't realize how much all of that affected you. Would love to catch up if you're in New York." Then Celeste. "We're so proud of everything you've done. We always knew you had talent. Any chance you'd come home for Christmas?" And finally, Isla. Hers was a voice memo. I played it 3 times. Her voice was shaky, like she'd been crying. "Helena. I messed up. When I was young, I thought it was funny, and it was so stupid. I didn't think about how bad it would hurt you. I know sorry isn't enough, but I'm sorry. I miss you. We all do. I didn't reply. I didn't delete the messages either. I just let them sit there, glowing unread. They weren't reaching out because they missed me. They reached out because they realized I had something now. I had an audience. A voice. Influence. That's when I started planning. Not revenge in the classic sense. No poisoned apples or scorched earth. I didn't want to destroy them. I wanted them to witness me. See me for who I really am. Not their weird daughter or cringe sister. But the woman they broke, and who rebuilt herself better than they ever imagined. My chance came faster than I expected. One of the conferences that reached out to me was a professional summit in Stamford, the town where Peter and I used to walk along the pier, where my parents would host charity auctions and brag about Alden's latest real estate deal. They asked me to deliver the closing keynote. I said yes. And then I emailed my mother. I'll be in Stamford next month for a speaking engagement. Not sure if you've heard. I'm the keynote. Thought you'd want to know, since I'll be in town. She replied within 10 minutes. Wonderful news. We'd love to attend. Your father and I have already purchased tickets. Isla's flying in from LA. Let's have dinner afterward? I never responded. But I knew they'd come. I made sure they got front row seats. The ballroom at the Stamford Marriott was packed. I wore a sleek black jumpsuit, simple, powerful. No jewelry. No frills. Just me. When I walked out onto that stage and saw them, my parents, stiff as statues, Isla with sunglasses pushed up into her hair, Alden checking his watch, I didn't feel nervous. I felt ready. I opened with silence. A full 10 seconds. Then I said, 2 years ago, I was left at the altar. You could have heard a pin drop. I was humiliated. Not just by a man I loved, but by the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. They didn't comfort me. They filmed me. They laughed. They turned me into a joke. And for a long time I believed them. I thought I was a joke too. I kept my gaze steady. I didn't look directly at them, but I knew they were watching. I could feel the tension in the air. But the beautiful thing about being broken is that you get to choose how you put yourself back together. The room erupted in applause. And for the first time I felt it, not just survival. Not just strength. Power. I wasn't the crying girl at the altar anymore. And I wasn't done. The applause faded, but the electricity in the room lingered. I stood there for a moment, letting the silence settle again. I could see Isla from the corner of my eye, her hands clenched around her phone like she wanted to record me but couldn't decide if it would be another mistake. My father's jaw was locked in that familiar way, the same look he wore when his cases didn't go his way. My mother blinked slowly, her lips pressed tight. I continued. I spent months, years, trying to figure out what was wrong with me. Why I wasn't lovable. Why I was so easy to walk away from. But it wasn't me. It was the people around me. The people who mistook cruelty for humor. Who thought vulnerability was weakness. Who weaponized shame. I paused again. I wasn't reading from notes. Every word was coming from a place deep inside me, a part of me that had waited too long to be heard. You see, people think betrayal is just about someone cheating, or lying, or breaking a promise. But betrayal is also silence. It's the moment you're sobbing and someone records you. It's when your pain becomes a punchline for the dinner table. It's when your own blood leaves you to bleed alone. A sharp inhale from the second row. I didn't have to look to know it was Isla. And still, I wasn't done. I used to think revenge was about payback. About making people hurt the way you were hurt. But that's not what I wanted. What I wanted, what I needed, was for the people who shattered me to see what they threw away. The applause that followed this time was louder. Real. No polite clapping, these people felt it. They knew it. Because they had been there too. As I walked off the stage, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt whole. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just telling my story. I owned it. No edits. No filters. No family spin. I thought they might leave before I came off stage. My father was the type to duck out early if something didn't serve his image. But they stayed. In fact, they waited for me in the hallway outside the ballroom. Helena, my mother said, stepping forward with that designer purse of hers clutched in both hands like a shield. That was quite a speech. Her tone wasn't judgmental, exactly. I was cautious. Like she was feeling out the social temperature before deciding whether to play the supportive mother or the wounded matriarch. My father gave a stiff nod. You've certainly found a voice. Isla just stood behind them, makeup flawless as ever, but something brittle behind her eyes. I didn't reply right away. I just looked at them. One by one. The same faces that had watched me fall apart and did nothing. The same people who had let me sit through dinner after being publicly humiliated, then mocked me for showing any emotion at all. Isla finally broke the silence. Helena, please. I didn't know what I was doing. I thought it would just be a joke between friends. I didn't mean to ruin your life. I've said I'm sorry. She had. In messages. In that voice memo. But she never said it in person until now. I know, I said. My voice was calm. Measured. You didn't think so. That's the point. Isla's lip trembled. She stepped forward, lowering her voice. I'm not that girl anymore. Neither am I said. She hesitated. Then can we start over? I looked at her for a long time. Not with hate. Not even resentment. Just clarity. You can start over, Isla. You should. But I'm not coming with you. She blinked. You're really not going to forgive me? I tilted my head slightly. Forgiveness isn't the same as forgetting. And I won't forget. My mother cleared her throat. This doesn't have to be some kind of dramatic exile, Helena. We're still family. No, I said, and this time my voice was firmer. We were relatives. That's not the same. My father finally spoke. So, what? You make a speech, write a book, and we're just the villains now? You made yourselves the villains, I said. I just stopped covering for you. The words landed. I saw it. A flicker in Alden's eyes. The tightening in Isla's jaw. My mother is trying to keep her expression still, but her fingers are twitching near her purse strap. I didn't stay long after that. I walked right past them, not angry, not dramatic, just done. Outside, it had started to drizzle. The kind of soft rain that makes the city glow under streetlights. I pulled my coat tighter around me and walked back toward the hotel parking lot. I had a car waiting, a quiet Airbnb booked for the night, and a train back to Asheville the next morning. My phone buzzed. It was Sabine, my oldest friend. The one who never left when I disappeared. You crushed it. Standing ovation. You okay? I smiled. I typed back, better than okay. Finally me. But as I sat in the backseat of the car and watched the city lights blur through the rainy window, I felt something stir in me again. A hum. A pull. I wasn't done. Because telling my story was only the beginning. Now it was time to turn everything they used against me into something bigger. Something permanent. Something that would make them regret ever thinking I was too pathetic to love. The drive back to my Airbnb was quiet. Peaceful even. The driver made light conversation, but I barely heard him. My mind was elsewhere, on my family's faces after my speech, on Isla's half-hearted apology, and on the absolute stillness I now felt in my chest where chaos used to live. I hadn't planned to see them again after that night. But something about their reactions, awkward, uncomfortable, scrambling to rewrite the narrative, stuck with me. They weren't sorry. Not really. They were just embarrassed that I had a platform now. That I was no longer silent, no longer shrinking in their presence. That I'd become someone they couldn't control or dismiss with a passive-aggressive dinner comment or a loaded sigh. They weren't trying to apologize. They were trying to get ahead of the story. And that's what gave me my final idea. Not for payback. For something cleaner. Something permanent. 3 weeks after the Stanford speech, I was invited to speak at a panel for a nonprofit that supports young women recovering from online abuse. It was in Boston, and I was sitting backstage with the director, Mia, an activist with a wicked sense of humor and a knack for planning big things fast. Helena, she said, crossing her legs and looking at her phone, have you ever thought about starting something bigger? Like, a foundation? I've thought about it, I admitted. I just don't know how to structure it. She looked up. I do. That night, over Thai takeout and wine in her apartment, we planned the whole thing. A program. A scholarship. A digital literacy initiative. But most importantly, a new kind of space, a fund that would provide legal resources, therapy access, and education to young women who had been targeted, humiliated, and torn down online. The kind of support I had to build alone. The kind of lifeline I had needed when I was the face of every cruel thread and Twitter roast. We named it the Helena Project. And here's where the revenge came in. Every nonprofit needs funding. I had some personal savings, sure, and a small publisher's advance from the memoir I was now writing. But for this to be real, to last, it needed serious money. That's when I remembered the trust fund. Back when I was 18, my grandfather, my mother's father, the only one in my family who ever really saw me, left behind a modest trust that was supposed to go to me when I married, or turned 35, whichever came first. Because of the wedding disaster, the money had been in limbo, and my mother had been quietly managing it. The irony? I had just turned 35 the week before my Stanford keynote. The money, just under $200,000, was mine now. So I used it. I liquidated the trust, moved the funds into a new business account under the Helena Project, filed all the legal paperwork with Mia's help, and quietly launched the initiative. Then I made one final move. I invited Isla to the launch party. And not just Isla, Alden, my parents, and several of their Connecticut high society friends. Not because I wanted them there. Because I wanted them to witness it. The event was held in New Haven, at the Yale Center for British Art. Elegant, modern, intentional. The room buzzed with voices from across the country, writers, survivors, educators, activists. Women who had been dragged, mocked, photoshopped, and torn apart on the internet, and lived. The moment Isla walked in, I saw her stop short. There, on a display wall near the entrance, was a looping video montage about our mission. And right at the center? A freeze frame of the infamous crying meme. Me. At the altar. But next to it, text in bold white letters, they tried to define me by my worst moment. So I turned it into my beginning. Underneath it, a quote from the podcast. You cannot shame a woman who has found her voice. Isla's face turned the color of chalk. My parents approached more cautiously. They hadn't RSVP'd. They probably thought they'd be able to sneak in, make a donation, smile for a photo, and claim they were proud from the beginning. But I wasn't about to let them whitewash history. As the keynote speaker that night, I made sure the story was told plainly. Not vindicatively. Just truthfully. I told the crowd how it felt to be mocked by your own blood. How trauma is magnified when the people who are supposed to protect you decide your pain is funny. How so many women are made punchlines before they're ever given the chance to be people. And then I pointed toward the donor's wall. The biggest name on it? The Isla Varnell Restoration Grant. Funded by the settlement she paid me out of court for emotional damages and defamation, after I filed a case through my lawyer Tricia. Quietly. Effectively. With documents that included every screenshot, every video upload, every cruel message she thought she could delete. She settled before it reached court. I'd insisted that her contribution remain visible, that her name would be tied, forever, to the work of healing the harm she helped create. It wasn't spite. It was accountability. When the night ended, and guests started filtering out, Isla approached me. She didn't say anything at first. Just stood in front of me in heels slightly too high and a dress that didn't match the tone of the room. You really did all this, she said quietly. I nodded. Yeah. I did. She glanced at the donor wall, then back at me. You really made me a sponsor? I made your actions meaningful, I corrected. I can't undo what you did. But I can make sure something better comes from it. She didn't argue. She didn't cry. She just nodded, and walked away. My parents left without a word. Alden did shake my hand, though. That was something, I guess. That night, back in my hotel room, I lay on the bed and stared at the ceiling. Not crying. Not overwhelmed. Just, breathing. For years, I thought revenge had to be loud. Explosive. Dramatic. But this? This was better. I didn't destroy them. I exposed them. I didn't scream. I spoke. I didn't disappear. I became undeniable. And I didn't just take back my name. I turned it into something worth remembering.